For a Chevrolet Sportsnet Central update, ESPN put out their NBA offseason survey from a panel of 15 NBA coaches, scouts, executives, and the Celtics by far received the most votes when the panel was asked which team had the best offseason. Boston got 6 votes, and no other team had more than 2. Carrying the Load is presented by the Chevy Silverado. Here's a refresher of what the Celtics did this offseason. They traded for guard Malcolm Brogdon. They signed Danilo Gallinari. They didn't lose any of their key players, and while they were involved in various Kevin Durant trade reports, nothing materialized from them. And this brings us to the Daily Thread with DJ Bean and Kevin O'Connor from The Ringer. And Kevin, you know, here in New England, we looked at the offseason moves of the Celtics and we said, okay, second-round pick in the NBA draft. They got Danilo Gallinari and Malcolm Brogdon. But then this comes out and it's like, oh, they knocked it out of the park during the offseason. What made the offseason such a home run for this Celtics team?
I was surprised 6 out of those 15 chose Boston as number 1, but ultimately, it's a fair choice. Brogdon adds so much playmaking to the Celtics roster, alleviating some of the workload we saw Tatum, Brown, Smart, White have to handle last year. I think he's going to be a major addition this year for Boston. And obviously Gallo's hurt right now, but theoretically, if he were to come back, you have Sam Hauser who can take over in the meantime. But if Gallo can come back mid-year, provide scoring in the front court, it adds a lot for them. Ultimately, I think Philly had the best offseason. They bring James Harden back on a discount, get P.J. Tucker, D'Anthony Melton, Daniel House, a host of really strong defensive players at the wing position. That's what Philly's going to need if they were to get through Boston this year. But both of those teams in the East had great summers.
You mentioned Philly there. I mean, if this were a list, Kevin, of teams that improved the most, I don't know if the Celtics would necessarily be at the top, specifically in the East. Do you think a lot of teams have improved?
No, I mean, a lot of teams stayed the same. I mean, obviously with Milwaukee, they didn't do anything besides just draft. But the fact they get Chris Middleton back healthy, who knows how the series would have went last year had he been healthy. But getting him back, that in and of itself is an improvement. But for the most part, though, no, the East hasn't had any big major swings. So Boston, in my opinion, still sits at the top. But Philadelphia has helped close the gap. Milwaukee with Middleton back does as well.
And Boston already in the conversation of going back to the NBA Finals this upcoming season. But Kevin, what makes this Boston team so good heading into the 2022-2023 season?
But I think it's very much the same thing we saw last year after they really found their stride in January. It's the ability to play so many different styles. Having a top-end roster with Tatum and Brown goes without saying, but you can play with 2 bigs with Horford and Time Lord. You can play with one of those bigs out there. You can play with spacing. You can have lineups with 5 guys who can handle the ball when Horford's at the 5. And that ability to adapt or dictate lineups, forcing the opponent to play different styles, that's what's going to allow them to shapeshift throughout the regular season, then into the postseason to play in different types of matchups against different opponents. So that is the most valuable thing right now, building a team right now in the NBA.
Probably the highlight of the offseason for the Celtics is the move they didn't make, Kevin Durant. I was definitely of the mind that they shouldn't have overextended themselves. I thought it was fine for them to say, okay, you know what? You want Jaylen Brown, you want a first-round pick, and you want, who else did they offer? Point guard.
Oh, talking about Marcus Smart? Derek White? Oh, okay.
Idiot DJ. Anyway, they didn't overextend themselves because they probably knew the Nets weren't getting a better offer than Jaylen Brown. Do you think they played it right by not offering too much for Kevin Durant? And if you were the Celtics, would you have gone all in for him?
I mean, I love the idea of going for KD. I was in favor of it, but for the price of Brown and the Defensive Player of the Year in Smart and all the first-round draft picks they would have been able to give up, maybe even Grant Williams on top of that too. I think that could have changed the culture of the team so much so that it would have been detrimental. So I think they made the right choice not going all the way in if Brooklyn even would have accepted that. Brooklyn might have just been trying to drive up the price, and some of these other teams like New Orleans that could offer both great players and more draft picks. So it's possible Boston could have just been used for leverage had they gone all the way in. So I think they made the right call.
There was so much commotion around Jaylen Brown this offseason with him being in trade scenarios. And then some people brought up that he felt disrespected or might feel disrespected by Celtics fans and the rest of the NBA. Kevin, any new concerns about Jaylen Brown heading into this season? Maybe him being a little upset about this offseason?
I mean, you'd hope if you're the Celtics, he just uses it as further motivation to continue improving on this insane trajectory he's been on since he was drafted. But, I mean, ultimately, this is up to Jaylen. He dealt with it with Kawhi Leonard. He dealt with it with Anthony Davis. And both of those teams that got Kawhi and AD won the championship the next year. And with KD, you're being involved in trade talks for an all-time great player who still dominated last regular season. I mean, to me, like, it's really a sign of respect, the fact that he's even involved in those talks, but how he handles it and how he takes it forward over the next 2 years before he hit free agency, that remains to be seen. But you would hope if you're the Celtics, winning is what cures any concerns there might be from him.
Yeah, go ahead, DJ.
Do you think that he's long for Boston, though?
I mean, you never know. I mean, there's always rumblings about guys who might walk or have a wandering eye. But I think as long as the Celtics take care of business themselves and continue winning, continue showing they can be contender, it's hard for a guy like that to leave a team in that position, especially given the continuity this roster has and the relationship they have with Tatum.
And Kevin, just really quickly before you go, what is your expectation for this Celtics team?
I mean, the expectation should be to win a championship. I think getting to the Final Four in the conference finals, that's like the baseline expectation for what they can do this year.